All right, we've had some requests for this one. People have been asking us to take a look at Alan Watts again. I think we've done like one or two Alan Watts reactions before, but this one's done by After Skool. It's titled The Illusion of Money, Time, and Ego. Alan Watts, I feel like, he's good always. You can always come back to him. He's got some interesting things to say, but especially in the beginning, when you're kind of trying to go from that sort of capitalistic-minded just achievement, when you're starting to bleed into the realm of like, what's beyond all this, like just achievement and success stuff.
Yeah.
And get into some, like, give me like a realistic view of spirituality. I feel like Alan Watts is a good doorway, entryway thing.
Agreed. All right, guys. We won't keep you waiting. Let's get into it.
Well, I have a sort of suggestion, and that is this, that before we decide either to save the planet or to destroy it, we pause for a moment of silence. I don't mean that kind of grim silence which one observes when somebody says, such and such a famous person has just died, and we'll observe a moment of silence in his honor. And everybody frowns and thinks very serious thoughts. That's not silence at all. I mean real silence, in which we stop thinking and experience reality as reality is. Because after all, if I talk all the time, I can't hear what anyone else has to say. And if I think all the time, and by that I mean specifically talking to yourself subvocally inside your skull, if I think all the time, I have nothing to think about except thoughts. And so I'm never in touch with the real world. Now, what is the real world? Some people have the theory that the real world is material or physical. I say it's made of kind of a stuff. Other people have the theory that the real world is spiritual or mental. But I want you to point out that both those theories of the world are concepts. They are constructions of words. And the real world is not an idea. It is not words. Reality is you will find, therefore, that if you get with reality, all sorts of illusions disappear. And I will mention several illusions that have not this kind of existence. Let's begin with some very down-to-earth ones, like money. Money is a very useful method of accounting. It is a measure of wealth in the same way as inches are measures of length and grams measures of weight. You cannot eat money. You could have a fantastic quantity of dollar bills and stock certificates on a desert island, and they would be useless to you. What you would need would be food and animals and companions. Money simply represents wealth in rather the same way that the menu represents the dinner. Only we are psychologically perverted in such a way that some of us would rather have money than real wealth. But you know, You cannot.
Man, that's such a significant point. Psychologically perverted to the point of wanting money instead of real wealth. Yeah. Like, you think of all these like weird sayings like, any man that's got friends is rich in spirit, or anybody that's got their health is da-da-da. And people dismiss that, but it's like, you shouldn't dismiss that.
Yeah.
You shouldn't dismiss that, because what do you really need? You know? Well, what I need is a ticket to Disney World. What you need is a ticket to some place that will gouge you for all your money, make you walk around like a slave in the heat all day, charge you way too much money for something you could make at a fraction of the price, twice as delicious, twice as awesome at home, you know, for a bunch of bullshit. You know, I don't mean to just attack Disney. If you want to go to Disney, there's no sin in it. But I'm saying...
You're making a bigger point.
Yeah, exactly. I'm making a bigger point, man.
Yeah, it's like...
How do you get that into someone's head?
What would you rather? To not be afraid or to have buckets of money? I'd imagine never being afraid again in your life, or never worrying, or like, you know, what's real wealth?
Right.
You know, what's going on inside of you, like all the things that, you know, and I'm not saying that I've conquered these things. I'm just saying that, like, you know,
how do you say the exact right way when you go to the guru and he's like a magical guru or something, and it's like, I can either show you how to get rich, or I can get rid of the illusion that you have that's like a sickness in your mind that richness is what you need. Now, obviously, if you're talking to somebody who's like living hand to mouth poverty, that's a different thing, man. And how does that happen? Maybe that's a better idea. How does it happen where somebody's like trapped in a desolate desert that doesn't grow food and can't get to somewhere where their needs are met, and it's violence and war? How does that happen? You know, because that's a different thing. If you're in the civilized... If you're not in the third world, you know, I see a lot of people complain about stuff. Like, they'll be like very upset that they can't live high on the hog the way other people did. Like, imagine boomers were like, why don't I get to live like Pharaoh? Why don't I get to like have like 1 million people marching under me? And, you know, but there are people that have food, have friends, have healthcare, have these things, and they're upset that they don't have more. They're frustrated, and I don't want to judge that too bad, because it's so common. I have that. I want more too. I'm with you, but there's, what am I getting at here? Why are we so sick? Why can't we enjoy what there is?
Probably because the part that we have to get past is we're pitted up against our neighbors. We're living side by side with each other, and so we see other people who we look at their situation and we interpret as, they have it better than me, right? And then there's jealousy and there's things that get inside of us. So, well, I want to, you know, and then you find out how they got there, and it's like, well, I worked way harder and they got there, and then there's all these games that get played.
But somebody noticed the phenomenon of jealousy. Most of us, when you're kids, you'd be like, I want the toy he wants. And then if you've got like a sensible parent that isn't a psychopath, that's like, well, how you gonna get it, sweetie? And then like teaches their kid to be petty and effed up, then that's a different thing. But if you got a parent that like points out the silliness of that and why it's available to you, you just got to wait a sec, or, you know, you have everything you need, like some gentle, wise parent would, then what really gets a hold of you that makes you that petty type of person that compares yourself to everybody is capitalism. Is every time you watch a commercial, it's like, do you have your blah, blah, blah yet? Because your neighbor does. You know, we get engineered by society, and it's terrified. Society's like, we got to do everything we can, otherwise the game's gonna be over. And this game of like this thing that we dragged with us through all the millennia of evolution, this like ape-like tendency to want to dominate each other and everything, we're just dragging it along. And there's many of us that are ready to like explode out of that, like, forget this, man. Like, I'm sick of the petty, ape-like, contentious, competitive world.
Yeah, maybe we have to, like, see it to the end, which I think is kind of what's happening with late-stage capitalism. We're kind of in that phase, where I think the younger generations are seeing what we're all doing, and they're like, we're not going to do what you did. And I feel like as we evolve, I think it's probably going to be very soon a next step for us. If it's not our kids' generation, it might be the next kids.
But it's tough too, because you never know really the full story. What if somebody found the biggest house on the street, and you're like, look at this guy. What are you compensating for?
buys the biggest house, and then he moves in a bunch of like desolate families. He's
Yeah.
like, I literally did that to try to save a bunch of people. Well, then you just want to look good for doing something. Like, it's in some sense, in real life, it's none of your business. I'm not trying to criticize anybody in particular.
Yeah.
Everyone's got their reasons.
Yeah.
But on the larger scale, I just wanted to focus on that exact thing. We ignore real wealth for fake wealth.
Yeah.
It's a perfect depiction of the guy trying to eat money on a desert island. People think things matter that don't. Well, if I'm not a certain amount this way, then I won't attract a spouse. It's like, are you sure you want a spouse then?
Yeah.
If that's the living hell you got to live in. And then, who are we talking to? I'm going to give our audience more credit and think I don't need to go over that whole thing again.
Yeah.
If you're here, you're already interested in this type of stuff.
Drive in 5 cars at once, even though they be Cadillacs. You cannot live simultaneously in 6 houses or eat 12 roasts of beef at one meal. There is a limit to what one can consume. So that's one of the sort of confusions I'm talking about. Another is that we confuse ourselves as living organisms with our idea of ourselves. That is to say, with a conception of myself which is called the personality or ego. That is what we have been told we are. And it's an extremely crude and limited conception of oneself, of the actual unique living organism. And we get unhappy because we're thinking of ourselves in this way, because we think, well, gee, I'm going to die. I once talked to a woman who came to me and said she was afraid of death. And we went into it in a long conversation. I said, what are you really afraid of? And she thought it over, and he said, do you know, what I'm going to be afraid of is what other people are going to say. They're going to say, poor old Gert, she couldn't last it through. Because you see, who you think you are is entirely dependent on who people have told you you are. You're not that. Then another thing that bothers us is time. Most people nowadays say, I have no time. Of course you don't. Because you are not aware of the present. You know, the present is represented on your watch by a hairline that is as thin as possible, as is consistent with visibility. And so everybody thinks the present is, instead of, now, the present is the only real time. There is no past, and there isn't a future. And there never will be. We think ordinarily of the present as an infinitesimal point at which the future changes into the past. And we also do a terrible thing. We imagine ourselves to be results of the past. And we're always passing the buck over our shoulders, like when God approached Adam in the Garden of Eden and said, hast thou eaten of the fruit of the tree whereof I told thee thou shouldst not eat? And Adam said, this woman thou gavest me, she tempted me and I did eat. And God looked at Eve and said, hast thou eaten of the fruit of the tree whereof I told thee thou shouldst not eat? And she said, the serpent beguiled me and I did eat. And God, out of the corner of his eye, looked at the serpent. The serpent said nothing. So you see, we're always passing the buck. And don't realize that the past is caused by the present, as the wake of a ship flows back from the prow. Now, the wake doesn't drive the ship any more than the tail wags the dog. But we've all got excuses. When my mother had a fit while she was carrying me in the womb, they didn't bring me up right. And then they go to the mother and say, how is it that you could have been so irresponsible with your children? And she says, well, it was my parents who didn't bring me up right either. And so everybody passes the buck. But the truth of the matter is, it all begins here. This is where the creation begins. And you're doing it and won't admit it. Because, of course, you're all God in disguise. Jesus found that out, and they crucified him for saying so. So this is a very odd thing for Westerners to understand, and particularly for Americans. Because we are so fixated on the future. When we say we want to put something down, we say it has no future. Well, do you? Much better to have a present. Because if you don't, it's useless to make plans. Because when they work out, you won't be there to enjoy them. You'll be thinking of something else. So we realize that we are living out of now and throwing the past behind us.
Man, such a profound message.
Yeah, the ability to live within the present and stop worrying about the future and all the outcomes. You know, we've watched a few videos recently, and I think they've been helpful for myself, and hopefully they've been just as helpful for you guys out there too, is to try and get in touch with that present moment and like stop engineering in your mind ways about how your future, you know, could end up. It's amazing how the brain wants to go there. It wants to like, and usually negative. Like, why negative? Why wouldn't you be like thinking about like, this is how I'm going to win the lottery. This is how, you know, I'm going to be healthy till I'm at this age. This is how I'm going to, you know, it's always like, what if this happens? What if this, it's like fears, these ridiculous fears that keep coming up. And I think it hinders, it ruins our present moment.
Maybe at one point people looked at all the positive stuff, like way back. Like maybe at one point the tendency was to plan positively for the future. Humans were like, wow, we can it's kind of like having a looking glass into the future. If we plant these seeds, we'll get some crops. This is amazing. And then somebody looked over and noticed someone doing something peculiar. It's like, I noticed you never walked by that bush. And it's like, yeah, I was walking by it one day and a snake jumped out and bit me and I don't go there anymore. And something lit up in someone's mind and behold, greed was born. And it was like, I can move mountains with fear and greed. Yeah. And now so many things lead you into this state of like, are you planning for the future? Are you doing this for the thing? Are you presentable? Oh my goodness, did you hear so-and-so? Blah, blah, blah. Like, it's just gotten out of hand.
Yeah.
We were in Eden when we were like, oh, the mind is a wonderful tool. Yeah. I can like plan things for the future. This is great or not. It doesn't matter. Everything happens in the present. So I'm not stuck to it. But now we're all way too exploitable based on fear. It's too easy to play all of us like a fiddle. You know what I mean? Yeah.
It's the nastiness of the way we can be sometimes as humans, and I don't want to hit too hard on it because I'd rather go in the other direction and be like, we're seeing it. We're starting to see it. And we're like the nastiness and the lack of mercy and the judgment, the bar which we hold up to others, but not for ourselves, you know, and they say, you know, the pointing and you shouldn't do that and do that, but yet you do other things, right? And like how we contradict ourselves, and once you get, I think, beyond that, if it's possible for humanity to get beyond that, I think we'll be more empathetic beings. We're going to be more loving. That's going to transition us into something, I think, more beautiful.
Find the most miserable bastard you can. Some person that's walking around like just full ego. You know what I mean? Like from head to bottom, they wouldn't be caught dead in anything that wasn't socially sanctioned and expensive. Yeah. You know, pull up in the best thing, and they're hyper judgmental to boot. You know what I mean? They'll be like, look at these disgusting clowns over here, and these freaking layabouts, and wagging their finger at everybody, essentially. Yeah. And then you're like, you direct them to some simple people playing in a puddle, carelessly. You know what I mean? People enjoying themselves. And they dismiss that so quick. Like there's nothing there for me. You ain't going to catch me doing anything that's not like what is appropriate to do. A person that believes their rigidity is holding the universe together. Like,
Yeah.
that's so terrifying. You're in Hades. You're in hell. And you actually, the thing that is most pleasant, like just being in life, you gotta like pour chemicals down your throat to feel anything. You're rejecting the thing that is most simple and pure. You're not gonna sit in a meadow and squash flowers and, catch butterflies.
Yeah.
And you would judge a full-grown man if you saw him doing that. You would think there was something wrong with that guy.
Yeah.
That is baffling to me. You know what I mean? Like, enjoy your years of therapy. Enjoy everything you got to do, and the more money you got to shell out to do it, you won't get an honest answer. They'll be like, I will, quite thank you. But the thing is, that's why they crucified Jesus. Because it gets to a certain point where if you're saying this stuff and you're like, all right, fine, I'm not going to argue with you. Enjoy your capitalism. They'll be like, where's that guy that was saying that he could live without that stuff? Is he actually peaceful? I'm going to go mess with him. You know what? I'll pay you guys $20 each to go F with that guy. It's the Count of Monte Cristo. You have to stand out. Because this is a mega complex. This is a mega prison. And the powers that be are organizing the algorithm certain ways. And, I've gone off the rails now.
Well, isn't this
Bring
why?
me back
Isn't this why a lot of people, so-called enlightened masters or a lot of spiritual people, hermits? People go away and they cannot be found again because for them, they're beyond it now. They're like,
So what if there was a movement of hermits? What if there was a hashtag hermit movement?
You might see that.
They're like, where is everybody? And then they're like, we knew that was coming, actually. It was to unleash all the robots that are going to be taking all your jobs. Now you can't have a job if you wanted one. House always wins.
Oh, jeez.
We invented Alan Watts.
Come on, end on a positive note.
That's true.
Yeah, I don't know. I like Alan Watts. Great stuff.
So do I.
He's fun to listen to. Hopefully you guys enjoyed it. If you did, don't forget to hit the like, subscribe, share this with a friend. And everyone, until next time, stay spiritual.